Welcome to the Hidden Corners, where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur, as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Well, this is book 3 of the Wolfman Chronicles. This is chapter 2, Hunting the Prey. Montana now. As I move through the stillness of the night, my senses come alive with every step. The earth beneath my paws feels cool and damp, carrying the scent of mass and wet earth. With each footfall I pause, lifting my muzzle to the air, inhaling deeply to catch the scent swirling around me. The musty odor of decaying wood, the crisp freshness of pine needles, and the faint traces of prey lingering in the distance. The moon casts its silvery light through the trees, and shadows dance around me, playing tricks on my vision. Yet my keen eyesight cuts through the darkness. My ears twitch, picking up the subtle sounds of the night. The rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, and the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. My instincts sharpen with each sound, listening for the footsteps that match my own. The forensic reports would not be back for a week. The sheriff told Jack when he called to check in. "I think it's best not to go out there alone, Jack," he had said. "I'll have a couple of my men meet you out there. You know your ranch better than anyone, so if you see something missing or something that might help us identify who did this, let me know immediately. I got some paperwork I got to finish up this morning, but I'll be out there around noon. I'll bring us a couple of Mary's sandwiches from the diner. I don't want you coming into town just yet." Well, Jack agreed. He was not looking forward to seeing the gruesome scene he'd witnessed the day before. But he knew he had to get out there to investigate. The sooner they figure out who did this, the better. He hadn't slept all night. He'd walked along the river until he was just out of sight of any of the ranches, and then he'd undressed and assumed his wolf form. He thought perhaps he'd catch a scent that his human nose just wouldn't be able to detect. He knew he'd have to do that at the ranch as well, but finding the opportunity, well, it might be difficult. There was a pot of chicory coffee waiting in the kitchen, and Lynn was cooking blueberry sourdough pancakes for the men. Brandon planned to spend the day out at the ranch with Jack. The faces of the dead haunted him. He worried that Lynn might not be safe and asked her to go into town and spend the day with her friends. The local newspaper had run the story yesterday with the headline, "Massacre at the Moore Ranch." It had everyone on edge. This was the biggest news that had hit their small town in several years. So it wasn't surprising that the news editors sensationalized it with words like massacre, murder, and mutilation. It left everyone wondering if this was the work of a serial killer or if the Moore Ranch had been targeted. Jack was known to be gone from his ranch for long stretches of time. Rumors and theories had already surfaced about his involvement in illegal activities that might bring a criminal element to their small, quiet town. It doesn't take long for a community to create an outcast from a good, solid citizen. Jack had been a brand inspector in his former life. Now he was everything from a cattle rustler to a drug dealer. "I think calling you out here might have been a mistake, Jack," Brandon said as he passed the newspaper across the table to Jack. "This will be a full-blown witch hunt before it's over. You've got to keep your head low. Don't go into town. Don't let anyone know you're here. I think you should lock up the place and let the sheriff handle things." "You know I can't do that," Jack replied. "Those are my men. I've got to contact their families, and I want to let them know that I'm not just standing by, letting the other men take care of finding out who killed him. Hell, I knew Angus most all my life. I've been to dinner with his ma and his pa, and another thing," Jack slammed his fist down on top of the newspaper, "I've got to put an end to this bullshit conspiracy theory crap." Lynn came over and put her hand on Jack's shoulder. We understand how angry you are, Jack. Let me know what I can do. A couple of the girls are putting together a prayer group for those guys. My friend Lacey was dating one of the cowboys that was killed. Maybe we can help tone down some of the crazy theories that are circulating around town." Jack reached up and took her hand. "Thank you, Lynn. You and Brandon have been just great, letting me stay here and handling things for me. I can't ask you to do more. But if you hear any more of that craziness sullying my reputation, well, I'd appreciate you letting me know what they're saying about me." Lynn laughed. "You bet, Jack. I wouldn't be surprised if people started saying you were a werewolf or some other such nonsense." Jack smiled. "Yeah, that would be something." Brandon loaded a couple extra rifles into the truck, and the two headed down the road to Jack's ranch. It was surprisingly warm for a February day in Montana. Normally, there would be a good covering of snow on the ground by now, but winter had changed in recent years. Now the heavy snows didn't come until March, lasted longer into the spring. It was 32 degrees and sunny. There were still small patches of snow on the shady side of trees and buildings, but not enough to discern any tracks. And now that the police had walked all over the grounds, finding tracks would not be easy. Jack was hoping to get into the surrounding fields and brush that bordered his pastures to see if there were any signs. In the silence in the truck, Jack thought about Sasha again. He wondered what she was up to. If she was back in Russia or had stayed in Finland. He smiled as he thought about how much he had wanted to bring her here, to his ranch in Montana, how he had hoped they might share a life together. A part of him wanted to call her, to hear her voice again, but he had other things he needed to focus on now. The two sheriff's deputies were sitting in the truck drinking coffee when Jack and Brandon pulled through the gates of the ranch. They got out when the truck pulled up beside theirs, and the younger of the two handed a badge to Jack that read, "James Maverick, FBI Special Investigator. Sheriff says to wear this all the time." He then handed Jack a ball cap that had the FBI emblem on it as well. "It wouldn't hurt to dye your hair or do a military buzz, something to change your looks a little bit." Well, Jack didn't know what to think about this ruse. Wouldn't it be better to just let people know he was here? It was his ranch, after all. Sooner or later, someone would recognize him and wonder why he was lying about his identity. He'd talk to the sheriff about it later, he decided, donning the ball cap, putting his cowboy hat back into the truck. "Tell us what you want us to look for," the younger deputy asked Jack. The four men walked past the house and out toward the barns. "Well, look for any tracks, dog, cat, or human. My guess is that the grounds around the house and the bunkhouse has been checked pretty thoroughly. So I want to look out here, past the barns. It's interesting that none of the horses or cows were hurt. But where are the dogs? I know we had at least 2 Aussies out here, and so far their bodies haven't been accounted for. I also think that the main focus has been on the 2 buildings, so we may find something out here that's been overlooked." Well, the men all spread out within sight of each other, looking for tracks or scat of a large wolf or mountain lion or possibly a human. They were scouting as a hunter would, their senses alert to every sound and movement. It seemed that danger lurked behind every shadow, and they felt like prey, acutely aware of their vulnerability. The buildings were still in sight, but they were walking the edge of a fence line towards a wooded part of the property. "I don't know about you guys, but I feel like something's watching us," Brandon remarked to the others. "You know when you're hunting and you feel like all of a sudden the tables are turned and you're the one being stalked?" "I feel it too," the younger deputy said. Well, Jack scanned the horizon, looking for movement, shadows, anything that might indicate a presence following them. His instincts told him danger was lurking nearby, and his acute sense of smell, not as sharp as when he was in wolf form, but certainly sharper than normal human, began to pick up a scent. A familiar scent. The sound of a horn from a pickup broke the tense moment. The sheriff had arrived, and upon not seeing anyone near the building, he honked his truck horn to let them know he was there. The 4 men turned and headed back towards the ranch house. Sheriff Buck Brady shook the man's hands and then sent the 2 deputies back to town. Now you remember what I told you. Nothing gets out about Jack being here. You don't talk to your wife, your girlfriend, no one about what we see or hear out here at the ranch. Right, boss, we got it. There's something lurking out there in the woods beyond the barns. We didn't see anything, but we sure could feel it watching us. Sheriff Brady told Brandon to go on home, that he wanted to spend some time alone with Jack and go over a few details of the last several months. He'd give Jack a lift back to Brandon's house later that afternoon. Brandon seemed a little uncomfortable, but he did as the sheriff asked. And once the other men were gone, Sheriff Brady and Jack walked over to the fire circle where the ranch hands used to sit at night and tell stories. There were chairs around the circle, and the sheriff had brought some sandwiches. Over lunch, the sheriff asked Jack to tell him the details about the last couple years, specifically since Sheriff Parker had died. You knew Parker? Jack asked. He's the one who hired me, right before he retired. I got to know him pretty well. Before he died, he told me a few things no one else around here knows. Except you, Jack. I want you to be frank with me. I think I know what we're dealing with here, and you're the only one I've ever say that to. Sheriff Parker was my friend, and I sure hated to see him waste away like he did, Jack said. Well, you know it was caused by complications from the wounds he received when y'all were hunting down the Jaegers. I know all about it, Jack, so tell me the rest of the story. Well, Jack proceeded to tell him about hunting down the Jaeger's son, Hans, in Washington, then traveling to Germany to research the Jaeger family line. There were parts of the story he kept to himself, specifically the part about being bitten and the transformation that occurred as a result. He wasn't sure he was ready to reveal that part of himself just yet. Something in the way it sounded made him think the sheriff might be searching for a reason to blame Jack. If he knew Jack were a werewolf too, then he might possibly think Jack had done this hideous act himself. So where have you been since then? The sheriff asked. Well, my sister had just bought a place in Colorado, and she needed my help putting together her new art gallery storefront. I decided to spend some time there with her, Jack replied. The sheriff waited a moment for Jack to continue, and when he didn't, the sheriff urged him on. I knew you weren't there for long, Jack. A couple of federal agents came by here looking for you. They said you and Catherine were the targets of a renegade Romani gypsy that had kidnapped Catherine and then killed an officer and a nurse when he was escaping from captivity. They haven't been able to find him, you or the sister, since. Jack looked down at his feet. Well, it's a long and convoluted story, Sheriff. The gypsy was really Catherine's father. We didn't know it at the time, that Cat had been adopted by her parents. We didn't know anything about the man, his story, none of it. But we had to learn the truth, so we followed him to Mexico, and we've been there the past several months trying to find him. Well, the sheriff looked over at Jack. I have a feeling there's a whole lot more to this story than you're telling me, Jack. Look, I don't give a damn about the gypsy in Mexico. That's out of my jurisdiction. But if you know something or someone who might have done this here crime, you better come straight with me. So I'm asking you again, Jack, what has happened in the past year or so that would bring this kind of death and destruction to our doorstep? Well, back in Mexico, the wedding plans were progressing as chaotically as most weddings do. Miguel couldn't wait to get out of there. He knew Jack had his hands full in Montana and had asked Miguel not to fly out. But hanging out at the hacienda and listening to his sister go over the seating arrangements for the umpteenth time, well, this is just driving him crazy. He'd booked a flight to Billings, Montana that would leave in the morning. He knew Julian and Usko would keep things under control till he and Jack could return. Julian wouldn't let Juanita out of his sight, and Usko was the same with Catherine. If he was honest with himself, he thought it made him miss Giselle, the one woman he had loved above all others. She had died in Brazil many years ago. There had been many women since, but none had held a candle to his wild and sweet Giselle. With one night left before his flight, Miguel sat on the veranda with Julian, smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. I'm leaving the ranch in your hands while I'm gone. You know what that means. Feeding the horses, taking care of the women, and making sure everything's under control. Don't worry, Miguel. It'll be nice to have something else to focus on besides the wedding, Julian laughed. Miguel sighed and swirled the whiskey in his glass. Julian, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for quite some time now. He paused in formulating his words. He didn't want to offend his future brother-in-law, but there were questions that had been bothering him for months. Why is it that you're so eager to wed my sister and stay here in Mexico? What about your life back in Germany, your responsibilities there? Julian looked out over the desert landscape. Well, besides the fact that the feds are looking for me since I killed a couple people in the U.S. when I was trying to escape that hospital, I have other reasons too. I really love Juanita. She's unlike any woman I've ever known. She's feisty, angry, temperamental, and purrs like a kitten when she's happy. I like making her happy, Miguel. And really, I like it here. Your ranch, Mexico, this climate. I have no reason to want to return to Germany except my mother, who is ancient. She will die someday, and there will be a big funeral when she passes. But my brother is handling things well, and he seems to be thriving with the responsibility of leading our people. So there is no need for me to return. I am a gypsy after all, Julian laughed. Miguel stared at his whiskey glass. Well, I'm glad you love my sister, and I'm glad to have you as a brother-in-law. You're both welcome to live here with me on the ranch for as long as you want. But here's what's really bothering me, Julian. Underneath your skin, you are a werewolf. And now, with this incident at Jack's ranch, I'm wondering if it could be someone from your past. I mean, look at it. The way Jack describes the carnage, it certainly sounds like it was done by a werewolf. And we all believe Jack was targeted. Whoever it was probably knew Jack wasn't there but wanted to get his attention. None of the animals were hurt, only the people. And none of the other ranches, only Jack's. So you think about it. Is there anyone in your past that might be targeting you through him? Who are your enemies, Julian? Julian downed his whiskey and poured another. He stared at Miguel for a long moment. Then he sighed and he began this story. I was a young man when I met Hannah. I loved her, and I would have found a way to get rid of Gunther so that she could marry me. But she ran away to the United States. I was heartbroken, and it took me years to get over the pain of losing her and my child she'd given birth to. My mother arranged for me to marry the daughter of one of the most powerful and influential families of the Romani Gypsy clan. She was young and pretty, and it united our two families. But I didn't love her, and she knew it. I wouldn't give her a child. So she found other men who would. Over the years, she became very bitter. She threatened to kill me or have me killed, numerous times, but I never took her seriously. I've been gone a long time now. But I don't believe she has the ability to find me, even if she wanted to. Are you two still married? Miguel asked. Well, technically yes, but we were only married by gypsy law, so there's no reason I can't marry your sister. Miguel laughed. Does Juanita know? Hell no, and you better not tell her, Miguel. She will kill me. Miguel took the early flight out of Monterrey, Mexico to Phoenix, then had a 10-hour layover. He'd arrive in Billings at almost 11 p.m. He hated long layovers, but there weren't any direct flights. He figured he'd take a taxi from the airport and visit an old girlfriend in Phoenix. He hadn't seen her in several years, and it'd be a good way to kill a few hours. He phoned Jack to let him know he'd be arriving late in Billings, and he'd spend the night in a hotel there, rent a car, and then drive out to Big Sky in the morning. Jack seemed angry and distracted. Miguel, I told you not to come. There's no place to stay here. The sheriff doesn't want me going into town. I can't show my face around here. They've got me wearing a badge saying I'm an FBI investigator. What the hell? Take it easy, man. I can help. No one knows who I am. I can make runs into town, do whatever you need. I can be the guy you hired to come take care of some business at the ranch. You need someone to handle things, Jack, especially if you're not really supposed to be there. And how long do you think you can hide out anyway? I can ask questions, kind of be your voice. Jack thought about it. Well, that's not a bad idea, actually. I'll introduce you to the sheriff tomorrow and tell him I've hired you to handle things for me. He knows the truth, Miguel. Well, some of it anyway. He knew Sheriff Parker. Parker was the sheriff on the original posse when they were hunting down the Jaegers. Now, he got torn up pretty badly and ended up dying from an infection from the saliva. I don't think he was bitten because as far as I know, he never had any transformation. But I'm not sure about that. I know he wasted away to nothing. Anyway, before he died, he told Sheriff Brady the truth about what had happened. And the sheriff questioned me about it today. Well, what all did you tell him? Miguel asked. Well, he doesn't know about me or Kat. I told him we were in Mexico staying with you, just trying to find Julian. Anything else, just in case he questions me? No, but he believes there's more to the story than I told him. He tried to get more out of me. Honestly, Miguel, I don't see any reason Sasha would be involved in this. If she wanted revenge for some reason, well, she'd come after me. She wouldn't have my ranch attacked. Well, I know, Jack, none of this makes sense. I asked Julian if he had anyone in his past that might do something like this. He mentioned an ex-wife that he doesn't think she'd be up to doing something like this either. Think about the Jaegers, though. Could it be someone affiliated with them that you don't know about? Someone seeking revenge because you killed their parents and their brother? Could there have been another child you don't know about? Now, Jack hadn't thought about that. Could there be another sibling he wasn't aware of? Well, it certainly was worth looking into. Okay, Miguel, I'll see you tomorrow. Let me know when you're getting close, and I'll arrange to meet you. Jack ended the call and thought about what Miguel had said. It would be helpful having Miguel here. He could charm the local librarian into telling him more information about the Jaegers. He decided not to question the sheriff about it just yet. There was something that didn't quite feel right about Sheriff Buck Brady, and Jack hadn't been able to put his finger on what that uncomfortable feeling might be from. Better to keep things between Miguel and himself for a while. Lynn had cooked a nice beef pot roast for dinner with potatoes and carrots, a big salad, apple pie for dessert. Lynn, by God, you're spoiling me. I could get used to eating like this, Jack said as they sat around the table. My friend Miguel will be here tomorrow. He's going to help me out at the ranch and get it cleaned up to where we can stay out there. I don't want to wear out my welcome here. Nonsense, Brandon said. You're welcome to stay here as long as you like. Miguel's welcome too, for that matter. But I can understand you wanting to get things settled up at the ranch. There's a cleaning crew coming in tomorrow. It's something the sheriff schedules. It's like a hazardous waste cleanup. Anytime there's blood involved. They'll do a deep clean of all the surfaces in the house and the bunkhouse. You don't have to worry about doing any of that. But what if there's still evidence to collect? Oh, I'm sure the sheriff's gone over every inch of that place. He wouldn't schedule the cleaning crew to come in otherwise, Brandon replied. Well, it seems pretty hasty to me. He wouldn't even let me in there this afternoon. He said they were still dusting the place for prints. It's probably for your own safety, Jack, Lynn responded. Jack finished his meal and the slice of pie, and then he said he felt like retiring early and went upstairs to the guest bedroom. He was tired, but he knew he had to get out to that ranch tonight, even if it was risky. He had to check out the rooms in private and before the cleaning crew got there. He planned to wait until he heard Brandon and Lynn go to bed, then he'd sneak out. He laughed. It brought back memories of his youth, sneaking out once his parents were in bed. I'm a grown man. I should be able to go out for a walk at night if I want to, he thought to himself. He decided to walk back downstairs and tell Lynn and Brandon that he was going to go for a walk. By himself. clear his thoughts, and they should understand that. He walked down the carpeted stairs. He'd left his boots by the front door. And as he neared the kitchen, he could hear Lynn and Brandon talking quietly at the kitchen table. Jack paused outside the doorway, hesitating for just a moment as he heard his name being spoken. "When are you going to tell him the truth, Brandon? Jack needs to know what's really going on here." "You know I can't do that yet, Lynn. It's far too dangerous." "But he's walking right into a trap, and I don't want to see that happen. I like Jack." "Just give me one more day, Lynn. I need just a little more information to go on. I promise. I'll tell Jack tomorrow." "But his friend will be here tomorrow. Then they'll both be in danger." "Lynn, trust me on this. Give me one more day, and then I'll talk to Jack. Otherwise, we're going to end up just like Angus and his wife." Jack quietly retreated to his bedroom. What did they mean, tell him the truth? Jack wanted to walk right back into that kitchen and demand that they tell him whatever it was they were hiding from him. But he knew he needed to wait. Brandon said he'd talk to Jack tomorrow, and he'd have to be okay with that. He'd wait till they went to bed, then sneak downstairs to the door. He had to get to the ranch tonight. Outside, a lone wolf crouched in the shadows, looking up at the window where Jack stood peering out at the stars. Her eyes narrowed into menacing slits. She lingered a moment, then turned and stalked off into the night.